I'm Mary Lou Sudders. I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm the former Commissioner of Mental Health for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the interest of mental health and behavioral health disorders has been both my entire life, personally and professionally. So I'm going to share what I know about mental health, U.S. behavioral health policy with you today, and some very specific issues around policies, financing, structure, the stigma of mental illness, which is true today as it has been for many, many years, and hope for the future. It's very important when we think about mental health and behavioral health to understand what the definitions are. Because when I say to individuals, well, when I say mental health or mental illness, what is it that we are conveying to you? And the terms can get pretty mushy, frankly. So mental health is a state of well-being. It's probably what we all want for ourselves in our lives. It is the ability to manage meaningful stress and reasonable amounts of stress in our lives, as well as to deal with the ups and downs of our daily living experience, our ability to maintain relationships with people, and to work and have successful lives. That's probably a reasonable definition of mental health. Mental illness, on the other hand, is the opposite end of the spectrum, of course. Mental illness is defined as collectively all diagnosable mental disorders or health conditions that are characterized by one or a combination of three things: thinking, mood, or behavior. And I'm going to give some very specific definitions of the three big disorders, illnesses that you will probably experience yourselves or within your family members over the course of your lifetime. Unfortunately, when we think of healthcare, though, mental illnesses get lumped as if it's a homogeneous kind of disorder. And it would be more helpful in the future for us to think about very specific disorders rather than just mental illness. But if I go back to a definition of mental illness, as I said, are disorders that impact your mood, thinking, or behavior. So when we think about mood disorders, probably the disorder that most comes to mind is depression. So depression is a mood disorder. You feel low, you feel helpless, hopeless, and many of us have days when we are moody, but that is depression. The other kind of disorder or illness that people think about is bipolar illness or manic depressive illness, and that is the highs of mania and then the lows of depression, and it's a cyclical event for many individuals with bipolar illness. Again, when I use these definitions, we're talking about extremes. Many people will experience a brief depression when you go through a stressful life condition, but then you, maybe with therapy or perhaps on your own or with the help of friends, you will sort of get over your depression. So when we talk about a clinical depression or a clinical or bipolar illness, we're talking about an illness that really impacts your ability to get through the day or extreme senses of helplessness. So those are mood disorders. Thinking disorders are generally ones, and the most common is schizophrenia. So when we say thinking disorders, it is disruptions in how you think about things rationally. Terms that you may hear of are things called a rushed speech or salad words. So a person speaks, but in a way that's sort of nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. Or someone may say that the TV is talking to them. Again, their thinking is not clear, it's not rational. And schizophrenia is probably the most common type of disorder. So I can reassure everyone that impacts about 1% of the general population. That is sort of the disorders of thinking, and psychotic disorders is what some people use. The other disorders or illnesses are behavior disorders. And what we're talking about here are primarily anxiety disorders. And the most common ones we know of course, are things like panic attacks, panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. Phobias are anxiety disorders, right? Fear of flying, for example, or fear of going outside. And again, we're talking about the excesses here. We're talking about when it really impacts a person's daily life. Now, depression is the most common of the mental disorders or mental illnesses, and it affects about 25–26% of the general population. There's one other term I just want to present you with, and that is behavioral health. Again, it's sort of mushy to some people, and it's often used interchangeably. But when you hear the term behavioral health, what we're talking about is the combination of mental disorders, mental illnesses, and substance abuse disorders. So when you take those two together, that sort of creates the universe of what we refer to as behavioral health. And so the fourth definition I don't want you to forget about is substance abuse disorders, because that affects about 13% of the general population in the United States and covers the range from addictions, the illicit use of drugs, and also tobacco. So that is when we talk about substance abuse disorders, again, it's that whole range of addictions, if you would. Now, the reason behavioral health is so important, particularly in the United States, but across the world, is that these disorders impact about 1 in 4 adults will have a mental health disorder that impacts their ability to get through the day or to maintain relationships with individuals or to go to work. And about 1 in 17 adults has a serious mental illness. And by that I mean that it is long in duration and substantially interferes with their ability to deal with life. We refer to that as their ability to engage in meaningful relationships, work, school, and basic living skills. And 1 in 10 children will suffer a serious emotional behavioral disorder. In many ways, when we talk about mental disorders in the United States, it's important to understand that the onset of symptoms often occurs far before someone receives treatment. So in fact, the majority of mental disorders are actually first prevalent in children. So by the age of 14, 1/2 of all lifetime experiences of mental illnesses and mental disorders occur in children. The reality is they often don't become really present in terms of symptoms until they're in their early childhood. So often in colleges, for example, colleges will often have experiences of young adults having their first episodes of serious mental illnesses, either depression or psychotic symptoms. First breaks of schizophrenia often happen in late adolescence and early childhood. The cost of untreated mental disorders in the United States is staggering, and it's estimated to cost about $79 billion as a result of lost worker productivity or early death. The other thing about mental illnesses to understand is that individuals with serious mental illnesses, so we're talking about individuals with the most disabling conditions, die much earlier than individuals without mental illnesses. It is a very sad reality that on average, a person with serious mental illness will die about 25 years younger than their non-disabled counterpart. And what they're going to die from are medical conditions, the kinds of conditions that you and I will probably not die from: untreated diabetes, heart conditions, and the like. So the disconnect between mental disorders and physical health disorders is profound and something that needs to change. As this chart depicts, the prevalence of behavioral health problems is quite prevalent among adults in the United States, both within a period of time of the past 12 months and present over the course of a lifetime. And if we use, for example, mood disorders, which is probably the one that most individuals would identify with, which is, again, mood disorders is depression. So in the course of a lifetime, about 21% of the general population will experience some kind of depression. It could be a grief reaction from the loss of a loved one, up into a profound depression that dramatically impacts one's ability to live and have meaningful relationships. And in the course of a year, it's about 10% of the population experiences a depression. What is really the takeaway from this chart, however, is how prevalent these conditions exist across the adult population in the United States, and how important it is for individuals with symptoms to seek treatment and to not avoid treatment as a result of stigma or fear, and how important it is for our healthcare professionals to be able to screen and diagnose these conditions and provide the appropriate treatment. So that gives you just a very quick overview of definitions of mental health, mental illness, substance abuse disorders, behavioral health conditions, and how prevalent they are in the United States, and the opportunity we have to really help individuals get treated for these disorders.